So in this part of the lesson, we're going to be creating this jewelry piece here, this one stone coloured stone pendant. Okay, and we're going to be using our shape commands to do this, including our newly learnt flex morphing commands. Okay, we'll be doing a toroidal bend. So let's get started. We're going to create a new file. We're going to use a generic template for this part. Let's call our file lesson 4 pendant. Okay, now we're going to start off by placing a stone. So we come into our gems and settings tab, navigate to place stones, to bring up our options panel and our pop out gemstone library. So we're going to place a princess cut gemstone. We're going to create a blue diamond gemstone. Okay, we'll come into our dimensions tab and we'll give it a dimension, a length of 8 millimeters. Enter. Now, without our width and depth activated, with the length of our princess set to 8, the width is automatically going to be set to 8 because it is automatically scaled uniformly according to standard dimensions. So let's place our stone on our top datum. Okay, we can see it snapping in on that datum automatically. Okay, so when we see the preview where we like it, we simply left click to place it there. We are then able to place multiple stones, but in this case we want just one. Okay, we can now move this gemstone library box out of the way, or we can simply cancel out of it. Okay, and in this case I want to rotate the princess 45 degrees. Enter. Okay, 45 degrees is 1/8 of a rotation. Okay, so when I pressed enter, that confirmed our operation, and there we have our princess cut blue diamond. Okay, so let's first of all save our file. Save. Okay, now remember our gemstones are brought in as components. Okay, our components, if we double click on them, have their own history. And we enter the history by double clicking on our component, and we must exit out into our part/assembly history by using our exit icon. Okay, here we are back in our part/assembly. Now if we exit out into our root environment, we will see we have our part, our assembly of our pendant, but also this new part that has been added that we didn't create. Well, we did create it, and this is our gemstone. If we turn our preview on to graphic, okay, we can see our gemstone that we created and also our assembly. Okay, in this case we can't distinguish between the two because we have only the gemstone in our assembly. But still, this is what I want to point out, is that when we create a component, it is automatically added in to our root object. Okay, it is added in our root environment. Okay, so if we were to double click on this part or right click edit, we will enter in to the stone history as we did before by double clicking on it in our 3D environment. Okay, if we double click here on our lesson 4 pendant on the assembly, we go back into our part assembly of our pendant, okay, with our component inserted inside of it, and we can access the component history through there. Okay, so next up I want to create a block. I'm going to use my block quick shape command. I'm going to use my first defining method, the center to corner. I want my center point, my first point, to be at the origin, the global origin. Okay, now I could change my display mode to wireframe, let it snap to the origin. Okay, that's fine. But now a different way to get this result is we know that the center point has a coordinate system of 0, 0, 0, so we can simply type this in, enter, and that places the block at the center point. So our second point, I'm going to define it anywhere because I'm going to come in here and manually set my length, width and height. So let's give it a length of 25 millimeters, enter, a width of also 25 millimeters, and we'll give it a height of 2.5 millimeters. So we've got here a nice sheet of metal. Okay, and now I'm gonna add a chamfer to my top edges. Okay, now we have a 2.5 millimeter width here. So this means our chamfer cannot exceed 2.5 millimeters setback. Okay, so if, for example, our setback is 3, we begin picking our edges, we're not going to get to preview. So often, if we have an idea of the setback that we want, it is best to change our value first. Let's say we want a setback of 1.5 millimeters, and then we can pick our edges to get a preview as we pick, to ensure that we know we have picked all the edges that we want. So let's confirm the operation. We'll save our work. And now I'm going to move my block. I'm going to rotate it about a point. Okay, my entity, I want it to be this shape, so set my entity filter into shape. Remember, we can bring up the entity filter by doing a shift right click. Okay, it's a quick way to bring up our entity filter. Pick our shape, the direction, we want it to be the z-axis, and we're going to rotate it 1/8 of a turn, 45 degrees. The same rotation we had for our stone. Now I quickly want to point out our direction we set as the z-axis. Now you can see our direction has a coordinate system, just like any point in space. Now the reason our z direction is defined as 0, 0, 1 is because we have 0 distance traveled in both of the x and y directions. The 1 defines a direction in the z-axis. So in fact we can set this value to any positive number and our direction will still be the z-axis. Okay, so any positive number will define the z-axis. By default it is 1. Okay, so a 0, 0, 1 resembles the z-axis. Okay, so let's confirm the operation. And now I'm going to make use of one of my flexing morph commands. We're going to be using the toroidal bend. Okay, so our shape is our block, our chamfered block. The datum is going to be the top-down datum. So let's navigate to a wireframe display, and we can pick our datum as being our top datum. Now I'm going to show you a different method of picking our top datum. Okay, we don't have to come into the 3D environment and select it. We can pick it from our history. Okay, so whilst we're in an operation with a particular field selected, we can select the entity for this field by moving into our history manager from our input manager. Okay, we can pick the entity within the history and move back into our input manager, and you can see our datum was picked as the top. Okay, so that's a different way to pick the entity that we want if maybe we have difficulty seeing it within our 3D environment. Okay, so here we're adding a toroidal bend to our shape. Let's actually change it. We'll give it an angle of 50 degrees. Okay. So here we have our toroidal bend on our shape. I do not want a rotation. Okay, and this looks fine to me. Okay, so there we have our toroidal bend. So I'm going to bring in a second block now. Again, I want to add our center point, so I can type it in here, 0, 0, 0, or we can also type 0, 0, 0 for short, and the system will understand this. Press enter. There we go. Our second point, pick anywhere. I'm going to dimension it anyway. So the length, I'm going to set it to be 3. Enter. My width, I'm going to drag it out. This is our bar for our pendant. Let's say 65. Okay, and our height, I'm going to say 8 millimeters. Okay. I'm going to bring it in as a base. We do not want to add it to this other shape. And I'm going to confirm the operation. Okay. Okay, now I want to bring my gemstone up a bit. It's currently hidden beneath all of this material. Okay, so if we go into the assembly tab, we can move components. We have our move command for components. Okay, and if we window pick, we're going to pick our component. And we can move it up. But I'll also point out, when we're in the assembly, these commands apply only to components. But if we are back in our shape tab, we pick our move here, we are still able to move the component entity. Okay, so it doesn't matter which move we use, as long as we're able to move a component. Okay, so let's pick the component again. Window pick, I know it's the only component in there, so I can do the window pick, and we can move it up. Let's say 3.25. Okay, we're going to trim out this material next, so that our stone has a place to sit. Save our work. Okay, so let's trim out some material. I'm going to insert a sketch, right click, our plane, I want the top down plane, so I could pick it if I change my display mode. Okay, we could also pick it from our history. Okay, let's make sure use central defined by plane is checked. Okay, the operation, and we're taking into our sketch level, our sketching environment. So I'm going to show target to hide the part level. I'm going to use a ready sketch shape to bring in this rotated square, this diamond type shape. Left click to place it at the origin. Okay, I'm going to dimension it, double click the dimension. I'm going to make it slightly smaller. Start with 15. We'll bring back our 3D environment, okay, to see how this lines up with that environment. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller. Dimension of 12 millimeters. Now we can exit this environment, and I'm going to do an extrude remove. I'm going to extrude our sketch. Okay, again I can't see the profile. To make it easier, I can pick it from my history. Just left clicking on it, you'll see it highlight in the history, and there it is, thrown in as our profile. I'll do a symmetrical extrusion, and I'll bring it out to an arbitrary point, because I'm going to be doing a remove. So our boolean is the remove. Okay, and currently it's removing our extruded sketch from both of these shapes. Now I want to specify which shape to remove it from. and I want to remove it from this shape only. Okay, so we're going to left click to set that as our Boolean shape. The rest of these fields look fine. I'm going to confirm the operation. Okay, and there we have removed material. So now I'm going to insert another sketch to remove material from this bar, this shape here. I want to remove material to allow my diamond to be seated nicely. So we right click, insert sketch, the plane, I want the side plane. Let's pick it from history. Side plane, this is the YZ plane. Confirm. Okay, so we're going to create a sketch that we'll then do an extrude cut with to remove this metal. So we're going to start off by placing a 2-point line. So we're going to create a line, 2 point, our first point, we're going to let it snap to the origin, and then we'll drag it out any distance and we'll dimension it from within here. Let's give it a length of 0.5 millimeters. Okay, so just below the point of this diamond, the culet of this diamond. Confirm. Okay, here's our line. And I'm going to turn this into construction geometry by right clicking on it, this icon, toggle type, turn it into construction geometry, so it will not be an active piece of geometry in our 3D environment. Okay, and now I'm going to create another line. I'm going to let it snap to the end point of this line. Okay, when it snaps in there, you see the auto constraint, the points coincident constraint. Left click. Okay, and let's follow up our pavilion of our diamond up to the girdle. Okay, and then I'm going to bring the length down about 5.5. Okay, we want to have a nice seat for our diamond to sit on. Confirm the operation. Okay, now you can see here this blue round dot. This is the points coincident constraint symbol. That shows we have the endpoints of the two lines constrained to one another. Okay, this square blue rectangle, this is our open ends. This shows our open ends on our sketch. And we can toggle this on and off using this icon here, the open ends toggle. Okay, we like to have this on most of the time because it's been useful to flag up any open ends in our sketch, because often we'll want our sketch to form a closed loop. We do not want open ends. In this case, we also want a closed loop. So we'll create one more line from here, letting it snap to the end point. I'm going to bring it up, let it have a vertical auto constraint. Okay, we can give it a length of 3.75 millimeters. Enter. Middle click to confirm the operation. Okay, and I'm going to mirror these two lines across the center y-axis onto this side. Mirror. Left click on our two lines. Middle click to progress to the next field. We can simply click inside of it. Pick our line. Okay, we could pick the y-axis here. Or we could use this line as our mirror line. I'm going to pick the y-axis. There you go, we have our mirror. Okay, and these icons here, these are our mirror constraint icons. Okay, so if we are to make changes to one side, the same will happen to the other side. Okay, and finally we want to close off our sketch. I'm going to draw a line between these 2 points, and notice as I do, our blue squares disappear because we are closing up our sketch. Okay, so this is what we want to see. Closed loop sketch with no blue squares. So let's exit out into our part level. Now before I do an extrude cut of this material, I want to move up our bar. I want to move our bar up slightly. Okay, so our move command, set our entity filter onto shape, select the bar, and we'll move it up a bit. Okay, to about there. In fact, that's a little bit too far. We have to redefine the last operation, and we'll move it down a bit. Okay, I prefer that. Okay, so now we'll do an extrude. We're going to pick our sketch. We'll drag it out any length as long as it's greater than the width of this bar. We're going to do an extrude cut, and our boolean shape is this bar. Okay, so we've cut out some material, so our gemstone has a place to be. Okay, so there we have it. In fact, I want to take out a bit more material to give a little more room here. I could enter back into my sketch and make the modifications there so that it cuts a bit lower. Alternatively, I could just come in and do a face offset. Pick these two faces and just offset them a little bit. Okay, see how that works? I don't want to offset them that much. I'm going to change my step size 0.01. Okay, the offset, let's bring it down a bit. To 0.3. Okay, so now we have a bit more room for our stone. Okay, so we're now seeing our pendant being developed. And as I'm seeing it, I think I want to make a few modifications. I think I want to accentuate our toroidal bend on this shape. So I'm going to come into my morph command, to the operation in history, right click, redefine, and I'm going to make it slightly more shallow. I think I'm going to bring this one up quite a lot. I want a big bend in here, I think. Let's really kick it up. Let's set it to be 125. Okay, so we have a really nice big bend in there now. Confirm the operation. The rest of history is replayed. There we have our new looking pendant, and I think I prefer it. More accentuated toroidal bend, which we've been able to edit within the history without having to erase all of our work that we did after creating that bend. So let's save our work. Okay, so now I want to perform a combine remove. I want to remove material from my bent shape where it intersects with the bar, so they could be soldered together more easily when it comes to manufacture. So I come to my combine command, left click, I'm on my remove option, I pick my base, so my base is this morphed shape, the operator will be the bar, and I want to keep remove shapes. I want to keep the operator, this bar. So let's confirm the operation, and now I'm going to blank out this bar, and we can see our removed material. Okay, so now this bent shape will fit nicely onto the bar, and it can be soldered into that position. So let's unblank the bar. Okay, now this result, we could have got the same result by using a trim. Okay, we could have used our trim tool to trim this shape to our bar. Okay, now I would like to trim out this material here. Okay, currently it's covering our stone. So previously, to cut out material, we created a sketch and then did an extrude cut to remove this material here for the stone. But an alternative method is to come into our Tools and Cutters tab and to use one of our gemstone cutters. Okay, these cutters will remove material from shapes so that our gemstones have a place to sit. Okay, so let's use the pilot cutter. We'll hover our cursor over the gemstone. It's going to throw a preview on there of our pilot cutter. Left click to place it. We then have a few more fields. I'm going to set the elevation down to 0. Okay, confirm the operation. Now when I confirm the operation, we'll have this tweak tool automatically pop up. Okay, and this allows us to make modifications to components. And I'll be showing you this later on in the course, but for now I'm going to exit out. Okay, so there we have our cutter, and it is a component. Now what we want to do is remove our cutter from our bar shape. Okay, so we could merge our cutter since it's a component and then do a combine remove. However, we have a command that will perform both of these operations in one go, and that is our merge cutters command. So we are prompted to pick our cutter. We can then pick our base, and this is going to remove our cutter from our base. Confirm the operation. There you see material has been removed. If we hide our gemstone, you can see the removed material. Okay, it just has a different color. Okay, so this is coming along now. Save our work. Next up, I want to add fillets to my bar. So let's use our fillet command in the shape ribbon tab. We're going to use the fillet edge option. We'll pick our edges. Okay, and our radius is already set to 0.3, and that seems adequate. So we'll continue picking our edges, and we could do this for the whole shape. Alternatively, if we confirm the command, bring up the fillet again, we could use our loop fillet to pick faces. And our fillets are done with less picking. So now I want to make a hole in this bar so that we can get a chain through it. Okay, so I'm going to insert a sketch on my side plane. Okay, I can pick it, I can see it, so I can pick it. Confirm. Okay, now I'm going to use my reference command up here, or I can right click, reference. I'm going to use this first option, the curve reference, okay, to reference this endpoint. Okay, so if I left click on this edge, it's going to project that edge as a reference curve into our sketching environment. Okay. Alternatively, if I undo this, bring up our reference again, I could do a face reference. This is going to create a reference curve at the intersection point of a face that we define and the plane of our sketch. Left click here, throws in the same line. Let's go into a planar view. I'm going to create a 2-point line. Okay, I want my first point to be in the middle, the center point of this reference curve. Okay, so I could use my right click options, middle, to set it in the middle. Alternatively, if I right click and I set my snap filter onto critical, okay, it's going to snap to the critical points on the line. Critical points being the end points and midpoints. Okay, it doesn't allow me to pick anywhere else on this line. Okay, and in upcoming lessons we'll be covering all of our picking tools and our snapping filters. Okay, so let's snap it to the midpoint. See a midpoint constraint thrown in there. And we're going to drag this line out with a horizontal constraint. Confirm. Okay, so our reference geometry is by default set to be construction geometry. Okay, you can see this because it is a dashed line. We could toggle it to be live geometry by right clicking and toggling it. Okay, so when we toggle it to be live geometry, it becomes a solid line, but it is still red to indicate that it is a reference. Let's toggle it back. In this case, I'm going to toggle this line as well to be construction geometry. Now I'm going to create the shape to use to extrude cut my hole. Okay, so I'm going to use a quick rectangle shape. I'm going to draw it anywhere. We'll set the dimensions here. Give it a width of 8mm. Enter. We'll set the height as 4. Confirm the operation. Okay, and you can see we have a number of auto constraints thrown in. Now I want to constrain the middle of this line on our rectangle to be at this endpoint here. Okay, so first off, I'm going to make sure that this has a dimension constraint by doing a right click, quick dimension, left clicking on the line, dragging out the text, leave it as any length. Okay, so now this line is constrained to be this length. And now I'm going to constrain the midpoint on this line to be at this point. So I can come into my constraint panel, navigate to my point to midpoint constraint. I can then pick the two endpoints of this line. The midpoint of these 2 points being the middle of the line. Okay, I can then constrain to this endpoint by picking this endpoint. When I do, it will throw in our rectangle at that point. Okay, I can now dimension this line, change the step size to 0.1mm. And you can see as I dimension this line, we've constrained our rectangle to be on this endpoint, and it moves with it. Okay, so let's move it up a bit. Let's give it a whole 5. Okay, let's exit our sketch. Now we're going to do an extrude cut with the sketch we just created. Okay, so extrude, our profile, set our entity filter into sketch. We know our sketch is under there. We could take a look at it by changing our display mode. Alternatively, we could pick it from history. But since we know it's there, we can simply do a window pick. Okay, and it picks the sketch, takes us into the next field. We'll drag it out an arbitrary distance. Combine, remove. We don't need to set a boolean shape because it's the only shape there. Confirm the operation, and there we have our hole cut. Let's add in a final fillet, edge fillet, these two edges, drag it up. Let's give it a value of 1.25. We're just giving a nice fillet so that our chain will have a smooth edge to which it can rest on. Okay, so this is essentially our pendant completed. Now for rendering purposes, we may want to add in a chain. Now we have a chain tool, and we use our chain tool by first defining a path that we want our chain to be on by creating a curve. So we could insert a sketch, create a curve going through here. In this case I'm going to navigate into the wireframe tab, and I'm going to use a 3-point conic curve. Now I'm going to constrain it to my top plane, I'm going to navigate into a top view, a start point, let's give it a start point up here, end point, and give it the same point on the other side. My middle point, we want it to pass through this hole. Not quite symmetrical, it doesn't really matter, but let's make it slightly more symmetrical. And now let's use our chain tool. We come into the Design, Sketches and Ring tab. Here is our chain tool. Left click. Okay, we have our Input Manager pop-up and also a carousel of different chains that we can pick. Okay, we have an error in the output. In this case, we can ignore this error. Okay, our curve in the Input Manager is this conic curve that we just created. Okay, we left click on it and you can see a preview being thrown in. We can then change the links. We can have two different links within our chain. So our first link, let's just set it to be a nice basic link, and change our second link. Okay, now you can come in and play around with this yourself. I'm just going to set it to this one as well. Okay, exit here. Here's our preview. Now it's not looking much like a chain right now. We just need to increase our number of links until we see a nice intersection. Okay, so they're overlapping nicely, but now we need our alternate links to be rotated 90 degrees. So we rotate them by 90. Okay, and here we have a nice chain using our chain tool. Confirm the operation. There's our chain. These are all brought in as components. Okay, now I should point out that whenever we bring in a component, you may have noticed this already, we have a datum thrown in at the center point of that component. Okay, you may have noticed it on our stones, and in this case we have many datums thrown in at the center point of each of these components. Okay, these are all assigned to a layer, our JCD datums, and we may want to deactivate this layer to hide them from view. Okay, so there we have our chain. We can erase our original curve. Right click, erase. Okay, so we're putting this chain in for rendering purposes only. It'd be impractical to print and cast a chain from this design. So here is our finished piece. Now we could view this in our live render. So we come into the Export and Rendering tab, left click on Live Render. Okay, we'll get a live render, a quick render of our design. We could improve on this quick render by bringing in a live rendering studio, or we could add some textures to our shapes. Okay, we can only add textures to shapes, we can't add them to components. Okay, so we could add some textures onto here. Okay, and then we could perform another live render and we may get better performance, a better image. Okay, but another strategy, instead of live rendering, we can add our own textures to our shapes. Okay, so there are a series of Jewelry Cad Dream textures that we can find within our resource files. Okay, so we can add these metal textures or gemstone textures onto our shapes by coming into the textures panel, and under this drop down panel here, okay, you may normally see it as checkerboard, but we're going to select the Chrome command. Okay, so left click on Chrome, then we'll pick our faces that we want to give our JCD textures to, and then in the options panel we left click in the file name field or on this red arrow here, and this will take us into a folder where we have a series of texture images. Okay, now by default you will not be placed into this folder, so you can navigate into this folder. If we start off on our computer, we go into our C drive, then into our program files. From there we scroll down, come to the ZW Soft folder, double click on the next folder. Okay, and now we scroll down until we see the textures folder. Okay, and this is where we have all of our textures. Now this folder is buried within quite a few other folders, so you may wish to copy this folder onto your desktop so you have easier access to it. Okay, so you can right click on it, copy, navigate to your desktop, right click and paste it in to your desktop. Okay, so now we have our textures in a folder on our desktop that we can navigate easily into. Okay, so if we do that again, come into our file name folder, go onto our desktop, and we should see the textures folder on our desktop. Okay, and now we have a series of textures in here. We have precious metal textures here. Okay, and we can assign these more realistic textures to our designs. So I'm just going to pick this 18 karat green gold texture. Okay, so that's thrown it in. We confirm the operation. Now we can come in after this to our face attributes and make further changes. Okay, so we can control pick our two shapes, then right click, navigate to face attributes. Okay, this will bring up our face attributes panel. Alternatively, you'll see it up here in the visualize tab. Okay, we left click on there and then we can pick our faces, our shapes. Okay, and now we can modify our face attributes. Okay, we can increase the shine, the gloss, and we can play around with our options in here to give a different kind of texture to our design. Okay, I often like to drop the default gold color. I like to bring the saturation down to around 150. Okay, you can see this is giving a different effect to our texture, and it looks pretty good there. Now we can't apply these textures to our components, okay, only to shapes. So if we want to apply textures to these components, we first have to merge them. Go to window pick them and merge them all as a base. Now we can apply textures to these components, which are now shapes. Okay, so back in the visualize tab, I'm going to window pick the chain. Okay, I'm going to use the control left click to deselect this bar from the pick. Okay, now I'll come into my Chrome command. It throws our current pick into the field. Okay, now I'll pick a file. Let's use the silver on here. Confirm. Okay, so we're adding a texture to these shapes. Okay, we can also add stone textures. Go into our Chrome command, pick the stone, navigate into our folder, come to the gem colors. Again, we can add these different gems textures to our stone. Okay, and then we can also use our face attributes on the stone to make modifications. What I often like to do for a stone is to increase the transparency. Okay, a transparency of around 15 is usually pretty good. Okay, and you can play around with these different options yourself to see how they affect the display of our design. Okay, let me confirm this. Maybe I want to increase the refraction. Okay, and there you go, we have a stone with a transparency. Okay, and when you have this, there may be no need to use your live render. Okay, we can disable our edges, okay, to give it a more realistic look. We could also come in to our visual manager, okay, and we'll be taking a look at this in a later lesson. We could hide our displays in the middle. If we right click on this local display, that's our datums, our global datums, we can toggle them off. We can toggle our triads as well, the XY axis, by coming into triad display, right clicking, toggling it off. Okay, now also bear in mind that these textures that we added on to our shapes, okay, they will not live render, will not get live renderings of these textures. The live render works only on the face attributes of the shapes and faces. Okay, it does not render the textures that we mapped on to our shapes. So we can live render these textures, but not those that we add on from file as a texture map. Okay, but we can export our designs with these texture maps on them to our better rendering engine, Thea. Okay, and Thea will be capable of rendering with these texture maps and create some very nice realistic renderings of our designs. Okay, so that's two strategies there to get a quick preview of how designs may appear. Okay, so we can add our textures from file, or we can perform a live render and play around with our face attributes.